there. So excited to get started. So excited for you to begin the endeavor of connecting with a mentor and learning about what you want to do professionally and then getting your foot in the door with professional opportunities. This workshop and this program in general is going to help you get to where you want to be as a young professional into your career. So I'm expecting you to watch this either live at 8 p.m., right when it goes live, or within the next 24 hours, and then post your comments to the questions that I have for you during the workshop. I will state those questions during the workshop when I'm doing our interviews with our interviewees, our guests for the evening. But more importantly, I want to know that you're engaged, that you're participating with this, because we've got a lot of great content for you. Now, when you get introduced to your mentor, reach out immediately. You should start the conversation immediately. You should not delay. I don't care what's going on in your world. I don't care if you're waiting for a career fair to happen. I don't care if you're waiting for some job interview to happen or you're waiting to hear back from some company. Get started. These mentors are here to help you. The more you delay getting opportunities with your mentor. So get started. But for successful completion of this program, for the way that we define it, have 3 conversations, at least 3 conversations. And those are just the general guidelines for when we believe that you should have those conversations by. Now, I'm not looking for a comment like, hey, my name is John Doe, I'm just checking in. That won't get you credit. I'm going to ask you specific questions during the workshop that I'm going to point out and say, hey, post your answer to this question below in the comment section. That's how I know that you will be watching, paying attention, and are engaged in the workshop. Now that I've shared my story with you, I am excited for you to embark on your mentor relationship, and I hope that me being vulnerable with you, maybe it inspired you to be vulnerable with your mentor. Hopefully it gave you the confidence to be comfortable with your mentor, and at minimum, hopefully it just gave you the confidence to be comfortable with yourself and who you are and where you want to be and where you're going. Now, for this mentor program, there are 3 keys to success in this program. That is honing your strategy, your story, and your state. Now, I said those in reverse order of importance. And I'm going to elaborate a little bit about why each one of these are so important in terms of being successful in this program. In terms of your in terms of your state is your physical being, your physiology. Like, how are you physically right now? Are you like in a peak state? Are you ready to go? Are you jumped up, pumped up, ready to jam? Are you coming into this mentor meeting like, man, I'm about to take on the world and I'm ready to go. I'm excited. I'm amped up. Or are you hunched over? Are you in a bad body language, bad posture, in a bad mood? Something bad happened during the day. You're tired, exhausted, stressed out, whatever. If you're coming in with a negative state, I can promise you're going to have a bad relationship. Your first impression is everything. Your first impression is everything. If you come in a negative attitude because you've had a bad day, I can promise you the relationship is not going to get off to where you want it to be. But if you come in with high energy, you come in like, hey, I'm pumped, I'm excited to learn from you, I'm excited to learn your story, I'm excited to ask you questions, I'm excited to share knowledge with you and have you ask me questions, I'm excited for this relationship to begin. If you come in with that mentality, you will have a great and positive first impression. Now, there's a couple ways that you can go about doing this. One way, and my favorite way to go about getting yourself into a peak state physiologically, is to get up, shake it loose, and yell at the top of your lungs. I know it sounds crazy to do something like this, but I want you to do it right now while you're watching this video. I don't care if you're in your dorm room. I don't care if you're in your house. I don't care where you're at. I want you to stand up, and I want you to shake it loose. I want you to shimmy. I want you to let it go. I want you to scream at the top of your lungs. Just go, yeah! Just let it loose. Let it out. Let it go. Because here's the thing, when you do this, you're releasing endorphins in your brain that make you feel excited, that make you feel energized, that make you feel good, that make you feel confident, that make you feel like I am here and ready to take on the world. And when you do this, you get yourself into a state ready to be in a good mood, to leave a good impression. So I don't care what's going on with your world. If you get yourself into a state physiologically conducive to being successful, get your body language on point, you are going to be successful. Promises on that. The next key is your story. So what is the story that you tell yourself? If you tell yourself a story like, oh man, I'm an introvert, so I couldn't possibly be good at networking, or I couldn't possibly be good at socializing or being around other people. Or if you tell yourself, I'm an extrovert, I'm crazy around people, I can't even handle it right now, I'm nuts. I can't even contain myself when I'm around people. I'm just like a blabbermouth. I have word vomit. I just let things fly like crazy. If you tell yourself these stories for why you will or won't be successful, that will become a self-fulfilling prophecy. So back to what I was talking about when I said the law of attraction. If you believe that you can be good at something, you will be good at something. I promise you that. But the key is you have to believe it. And the second thing is you have to practice it, because networking is a skill, like shooting a basketball or knitting a quilt. The more you practice, the better you get. So if you think, oh man, I'm an introvert or I'm an extrovert, which makes me bad at networking, you're not going to practice networking, which is going to reinforce you being bad at networking. But if you work at it, if you practice, if you use this mentor program to meet with your mentor, someone who's got like of no consequence to you, like if you, God forbid, mess up this relationship with your mentor, what is the worst that happens? This was a total stranger that you've never met before this moment. Now all of a sudden you're building this relationship. Why not give it a shot? Because here's the thing. If it ends up working out great, it gives you the confidence to start reaching out to more people and building a better rapport with more people and building your network. And then all of a sudden you can become better at networking. You can be better at building relationships with other people. And you can be better at learning opportunities when they arise and getting your foot in the door. So the point I'm making here is, what is the story you tell yourself? What is the thing that you've got in your mind for why you will or will not be successful? And the key here is that if you do have something positive in your mind, I promise you, you are going to be much more likely to manifest that outcome for yourself. And the last key is the strategy. So what are the strategies that you are going to leverage to help you getting your foot in the door for an opportunity? Now, here's something that I like to do. I like to implement new routines every single month, because what it does is it helps me get into into powerful habits. Now, some of them stick, some of them don't stick. Some of them take, a while to stick. Some of them take practice, and that's okay. But the key is that you have to start. And so one thing that I would love for you to start doing in terms of a strategy to help you build a strong routine that will help you start getting your foot in the door is the one, if you don't have a LinkedIn profile account, get a LinkedIn profile account. LinkedIn is a powerful tool. It's so powerful. But then once you've gotten a LinkedIn profile account, I want you to connect with 10 new people in your field, not just 10 new friends or whatever. If you're just starting your LinkedIn account, friend request everybody. Get as many as you can. In fact, you should really try to get above 500 plus LinkedIn connections, because once you're there, you are much more in the LinkedIn algorithm likely to get recommended by other people in terms of connecting with them. But more importantly, I want you to connect with 10 new people in your field of interest. So if you want to get into banking, connect with 10 bankers. If you want to get into marketing, connect with 10 marketers. If you want to get into engineering, connect with 10 engineers. Connect with 10 new people every single week. And it's a really easy thing to do. Send them a personalized message. Say, hey, Jane Doe, I'm a student studying XYZ category. I'm really interested in your work, and I'm interested in potentially pursuing a career in this path. I would love to connect and maybe learn a little bit more about your work, your name. It's the simplest message, but if you can get into the habit of sending 10 new people a connection request every single week, I promise you, are going to start meeting with some of these people, and this could open up doors that maybe weren't even there or you didn't even realize were possible. I strongly encourage that. 70% of all job offers go to somebody who knows somebody at that company, not from just applying blindly on a college career website. I promise you that. 70% of jobs go to someone who knows someone at that company. So if you can build relationships with somebody at that company, your resume will go to the top because you were a referral, not a random stranger who applied. Build your network. So one thing that I love to do, and by the way, we're about to get started into our guest speaker. But one thing that I love to do before, to really reinforce what we're talking about, one thing that we've learned is teaching something to somebody else. So think about something that you've learned within these first few minutes of this workshop so far, or something that you will learn through our guest speaker in this workshop. I want you to think about that, and I want you to teach it to somebody else. Something that you learned. And the reason why this is so powerful is because learning something in a workshop is amazing. I mean, sure, I'm on here, I'm on this video, and that's great. That's all. That's amazing. That's fine and dandy. But if you go back to bed, or if you're like, oh, that was cool, I kind of took a note, whatever, like that might stick, but the likelihood that it actually sticks increases exponentially when you teach it to somebody else. So find a friend, find a stranger, find somebody, and teach them something that you learned this evening. And I promise you, it will reinforce substantially more in your brain. You are much more likely to adopt the habits that you are learning. You're much more likely to apply the skills that you are gaining. So that is the key thing that I really want to stress with you from this workshop. So I'm really excited to jump into our guest speaker, because we've got a great one for you this evening. I'm excited for you to learn from our guest.
Hey everyone, I'm so excited to dive into our topic for today. Our topic is how to get your foot in the door for professional opportunities. We got a great guest with us here today, Sean Wagner. Sean, do you mind just introducing yourself to our audience so then our students can learn a little bit more about you and your background?
Sure, yeah. So, as Garrett said, my name's Sean Wagner. I'm the CEO and Executive Vice President of Phi Delta Theta International Fraternity, which a lot of times people conjure all sorts of images in their head in terms of what that means if you're leading a men's college fraternity, because that's what we are. So when I'm talking to somebody on a plane, what I try to do in terms of dismissing any of those thoughts and what they're doing is, number one, from a Phi Delta Theta perspective. I always share that we lead with our values, which are friendship, sound learning, and moral rectitude. But more importantly, we've taken some big steps over the years to represent that, and to actually fly in the face of what a lot of people think about fraternities. So we eliminated alcohol from our chapter houses in 2000. We were not in the bar business; we're in the people business and the leadership business, and so that was important. And then we've also taken on some big initiatives like creating our own philanthropy to eliminate ALS from this planet. Partnering with the Anti-Hazing Coalition, which is a group of parents that have lost their sons to hazing, and actually lobbying on behalf of them to have stricter penalties against hazing on both the federal and the state level. So that's the work that we do. We try to offer a transformational leadership experience while also really trying to battle against what people project fraternity is. From my seat, we've got 200 undergraduate chapters throughout the United States and Canada, about 12,000 undergraduates, about 200,000 living alumni. And so I operate our headquarters here in Oxford, Ohio, which is where we were founded, about 500 yards that way, in a building here on campus, one of the original 4 buildings at Miami University. And kind of the day-to-day is a cross between running a nonprofit, an association, serving all those members, being good servant leaders to all those members that I mentioned before, while also kind of providing supports to franchisees, right? All those chapters are trying to do the work that I described earlier. So the only difference between our franchisees and some of the other businesses is that they're 18 to 22 years old, right? Which has a whole nother set of challenges.
Yeah, no, that's cool. One of the reasons why I'm really excited to have you on here for your perspectives is because you work with a lot of college students and you've seen probably the college landscape evolve over time. But before we dive into that, how did you get into this role? Could you just share with me the genesis of like where you were after college, how that led to one position to the next position? Like, I'd love to learn about your trajectory and how you got here.
Sure. Yeah. And I think it's pretty relevant for the conversation because, it's unique that I work for an organization that I'm a member of. And so it was super familiar for me to connect to it. But nonetheless, I think a lot of the folks that are thinking about their career, while it may not be where they're going to be forever, it was leveraging those relationships that I had, right? So I was a member and am a member of Phi Delta Theta at Wagner University, which I always say, if you've been to the Philadelphia airport, you've basically been to Wagner. It's like 3 miles south. And had a great undergraduate experience. And so I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And, that world that I just explained in whatever it was, 30, 60 seconds or whatever, I didn't really understand the gist of it, right? So I connected with people that were a little bit closer to it because had a great experience, was a communications major, undergraduate major, and wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to do. And so I talked to people that I knew and kind of this world unfurled in front of me. And so I found an entry level job that allowed me to kind of get my foot in the door. And then, kind of I can share the rest of my path if you want, Garrett.
Yeah. I'd be curious. So just to be clear, right out of college, you
Yeah.
went immediately into Phi Delta Theta. Is that correct?
Yeah. So, basically like everybody, right? 6-8 months before graduation, I'm looking around and look to my network within the organization and saw this path. And I had a sense, but understood, kind of what a specific career role would be, at least initially. I think the thing that was important to me, which is relevant for any time you're looking for a role, a lot of times people think about how you move up directly. But what this one, when I was looking at it, it's almost 21 years ago. But there's lots of opportunities to open the doors to a lot of other opportunities, right? So we're an organization that is all about relationships. And so I knew I was going to come into the organization. I was going to be working with a lot of people, again, all those members I just mentioned before, and that was going to just provide me the chance to connect with folks, right? And so yes, I could work for the fraternity forever, and actually kind of worked out that way. But I would also have a great network that would be open to me. So that's why I kind of chose it. I wanted to have other opportunities. I wanted to give back to the organization that had meant so much to me. I knew a lot about the organization at that point, and the opportunity was to connect directly with undergraduates. And so I knew I could do a good job in that. And that would provide me, equity in my career, right? That would build up equity, both from a relationship standpoint, as well as the chance to be able to cash that in either in my own organization or others. And so that's what I did for a year. It was great, but I actually left after a year. So, and this is one of the, obviously one of the great kind of fork in the road moments for me. I enjoyed giving back. It was a lot of travel that I didn't necessarily love. And it wasn't really professional travel. It was travel where it was just kind of the nature of the job. We don't do this stuff anymore, but it was sleeping in fraternity houses and, bunking up with different members. And I'm glad to say as CEO, we've changed conditions a little bit that way. But I didn't love that. So I actually went to work for Subaru of America. I'm from Philadelphia, like I said, out in Oxford, Ohio now. Their corporate headquarters outside of Philadelphia. And so I did have a friend's brother who worked for the company and was recruiting and understood the relatability in the work that I was doing, kind of supporting local franchises, right? Again, kind of untraditional model, but how did that work in the dealership model? And so had a chance to go work for them for a year. But real quick,
Sean, real quick, how'd you get your foot in the door for that opportunity? How'd you connect with Subaru?
Yeah, no, so that was just a relationship, right? I mean, that was literally just listening, right, to someone that was talking about the work that they were doing, and just like I had understood the relatability of my undergraduate experience, the fraternity, I understood the relatability of my experience with the fraternity to Subaru, right? And so just talked about that, and then in having that conversation, he's the one that actually asked me to apply, right?
How did you meet this person? Where, like, did you just like run into each other on the airplane? Like, how did you meet?
Yeah, so great question. This is, I think pretty familiar to anybody that may have moved away from some places coming back on the holidays, right? I was just, I think, probably having lunch or a beer with friends from high school. And this was a brother of a friend that I knew fairly well, but certainly not well enough to think that he was going to offer me a job. But that's what it led to.
Wow, that's cool. So I think that's a really great story, Sean, because I think a lot of students that are watching this right now that might be thinking to themselves, if they are seniors and they're looking at the job market and they're feeling very intimidated, one, they might feel, okay, this is going to be the decision that's going to, state everything for the rest of my life. And I think what you just proved was that, one, no, that's not the case. The job that you take right after college is not necessarily the job that you're going to have for the rest of your life. I mean, it could be, but doesn't have to be. And
Right.
Two, it could be personal network. It could be your friend's brother. It could be whomever you meet with, which I think also points to the reputation you leave, just making sure that you're being a genuinely kind person, a genuinely conscientious person to those that you're around. Because let's put it this way, if you were out grabbing a beer and you were just, hammered, that probably would not be the indicator your friend's brother wanted to see. To make a job offer. But you were professional, you had a good time, you had great conversation. Your friend's brother said, you know what, I think this could be an interesting opportunity here. By the way, how did your friend's brother know that you were open to the opportunities and potential? Because I mean, was he going to like your friend and your other friends, or did he identify you specifically? And if so, why?
Yeah, so I think to add to everything that you just mentioned, I think the other piece for me was being curious, right? And so I think it was having conversations about the work that he did and being genuinely interested, right, in that. And so then a dialogue started in terms of what he did versus what I did. And so then it was just between the two of us that had connected on that topic and the relatability, and then kind of everything else took off, right?
That power of curiosity. I think that's one of the most powerful things that, like, as a student, you might be thinking to yourself, okay, I'm going into this first career, I'm trying to figure it out. I think if there's any skill or ability that you can develop that will set you apart from any and every other person, it is genuine curiosity. Because curious people like people that are curious. Everybody loves their own story. Everybody loves to talk about the things that they do and themselves. And You are genuinely curious in them, and themselves is their most important topic in their mind. You are now going to be of interest to them. So,
Yep.
for example, for me, I think my story is interesting. If you were to ask me about my story, I'm going to be a whole lot more interested in you because you took the time to be curious about me.
Yep, I couldn't agree more. And yeah, so I think that makes perfect sense. The other piece that you had mentioned as well is, again, just personal reputation, right? Like I was someone that was known to be a leader in high school, so I think my friend's brother had a sense of that, right? In the organizations I was involved in. So on top of how I presented myself and my ideas, just that continued reputation, that continued personal brand, right? I think obviously all factored into that conversation as someone that, later on he would vouch for, right? In an interview process. I wasn't just, some screwy friend of his brother, right? It was someone that he had a general awareness, not connected of, but a general awareness of somebody that was responsible and now had this relatable experience that would make someone that he would want to fully endorse. So yeah, again, I think it's important to not be bashful in those situations. It's important to just connect. I mean, the more people that study after study show, the larger the network you have, the more successful you're going to be, right? And so it could be to get you a job that, like it did for me, I think probably 6 months later, or it could just be to have someone that may be helpful for you to understand an industry better, right? Or a civic organization you might want to get involved in, right? Any of that stuff makes us, kind of more informed along our journeys, right? No matter where they take us.
Shoot, you and I, that's a perfect example of that. I mean, you and I first connected through our higher ed mentor programs, and then we rekindled our relationship through our executive mastermind groups. It's the power of staying in touch is really there, and it's absolutely real. So I'd love to take a moment to ask the students a question real quick. Write it down in the comment section. What are 3 questions that you like to ask people to showcase that you're genuinely curious in who they are and what they're about and where they're coming from? Post in the comment section. I'd love to learn and just really get you as students watching this in the habit of thinking about what are questions you could be genuinely intentional about when it comes to being curious about who somebody else is. So you're at Subaru.
Yeah.
How long were you there? What was the next step after Subaru?
Yeah. So big lesson that I share with students all the time. So obviously it was a big deal to be working for a pretty successful company, a growing company. They had growth in sales year over year. Very community vested in the work that they did. But 2 things happened. One, when I was at the fraternity the year before, I mentioned I was interacting with all those folks. I had a significant impact in the work I was doing. I could feel it. I could see it every day. I didn't feel that way at Subaru. I was a small fish in a big pond. The other thing is that while it was a civically engaged company, it wasn't necessarily something that I was personally invested in. Was glad that we had great causes. Was glad that we had a really safe product, but it wasn't anything that was very, very personal. And so what I did though know is that a couple things that happened through that experience. One, I had learned how another organization had ran and grown and had done business development. Because it was a management training program. Essentially, I would have eventually ended up in the field. I would have been in a regional office supporting dealerships. So I was training for that. And then the other piece was I had inherited kind of a reputation as someone that had that experience, right? And so I had maintained my relationships with folks at Phi Delta Theta, and a mentor of mine was in the process of leaving. And he did what we call as expansion. So I mentioned those 200 chapters. The way that we get those is by finding campuses where we think we can have long-term success and that we're aligned with from a values perspective, or going back to places where we've been previously. And I'd done a little bit of that work before, and him knowing what I did now and knowing that I wasn't super happy. We had connected a couple times and I was missing something, as what I talked about before. Had reached out and wanted to see if I was interested.
Nice. And that got you back into Phi Delta Theta. That's really cool. internally within the organization, how did you work your way up to the CEO role? How did you go about taking advantage of the opportunities that presented themselves? Because I think there's a lot of students that think about their careers and think like, oh, I'll be here for the first 3 years and then bam, CEO position. And that's not necessarily how the trajectory works in a normal environment, or just really knowing exactly when, what, and where an opportunity may lie. How did you go about identifying those opportunities, and how did you go about working way up to that?
Yeah, and whenever we're talking, we hire a lot of young people right out of school or a year or two out. And so when we're talking about opportunities here or elsewhere, we always talk about careers kind of like chutes and ladders, right? In terms of being able to move you around depending on the opportunities that are provided to you. And so for me, I came back again having business development experience, thinking that I was going to gain basically the experience of market-directed collegians, and that being such an important demographic to corporate America, that was an experience that I was gonna take with me. And so here I build off kind of my last two phases: organizational familiarity, had the opportunity to give back to an organization I loved again, and then get that experience. But what I realized is the benevolence of the role was something that was really important to me. And then the chance to work side by side with people that really cared about the organization was really important to me.
Real quick, when you say the benevolence of the role, that's a fascinating adjective to describe a position. What do you mean by the benevolence of the role?
Yeah, I mean, I think from you could say it's the altruistic piece as well, right? It was just very important for me to participate in an organization that was the greater good, right? That's really what I was looking for. And I also found that there was a career there to be had. So rather than just going to corporate America, I could find an industry, either in association management or within higher education or other nonprofits that have similar purposes, right, than Phi Delta Theta. So that's what I started preparing myself for. So I did the expansion thing for 2 years. I got my master's. I have a master's in public administration and nonprofit management. And again, kind of looked at opportunities that would tie these things together. So I was thinking I was going to go from business development in the association management space to leverage that with my master's degree to then probably transition into what would most likely be a fundraising role. So translating, which it was just kind of like the sales side of nonprofit or higher education. And so that's where I thought I was going to go. But what happened then was I had a supervisor that was in the process of leaving and had the opportunity to talk about taking on some managerial responsibilities. And I think up to that point, on top of the fact that I had committed to a related career, right? Not specific to what the role was, but something that was related and that I was generally interested in terms of working towards, and the fact that I worked hard, right? Every day. I want my personal reputation to be someone that didn't just do what was asked of them, but look for other opportunities. And then also look to innovate. I mean, those were just things that I think I saw within folks that I valued and thought highly of within the organization, within my network, that I wanted to emulate. So coupled with kind of me gaining these experiences in education that would lend themselves to management, as well as my personal brand, my personal reputation, I think was what made me the candidate that they asked to pursue this role. They didn't ask anybody else. They asked me.
That's fascinating. So that's really cool. I love the point you just bring up about not necessarily being told what to do, but proactively seeking out opportunities. I think that's something that's really, really relevant for a lot of college students, because unlike the college curriculum where it's like you have a professor and your professor says you need to do A, B, and C. And as long as you do A, B, and C and you answer these questions the way they want you to answer them, boom, you've done it. In the professional world, it's not about following instructions and just being like, check that box. It's actually going out proactively seeking opportunities to find ways to get more involved, to be innovative, to try new things. And I think that's a really, really powerful note. And so just to be clear, they approached you about the role. Did you ever, I mean, beyond just, I guess, being proactive about your development, did you ever come to them about management? I guess the reason why I ask is if there are, let's say, students that are interested in a managerial position, and they're trying to be proactive, but perhaps maybe it hasn't been proposed to them because the business opportunity hasn't lended itself to that. Like, how do you marry those two kind of concepts together?
Yeah, so I'll tell you about what it was for me, and then I'll tell you how we coach people within our organization today, right? Kind of answer your question. So for me, I was clear about where I wanted to go potentially, not necessarily within Phi Theta, but from a career perspective. Again, kind of this process of elimination, right? I understood now that I wanted to support an organization for the greater good. I wanted to be involved on the sales or business development or fundraising side. And so there was that sense because we had active conversations about my professional interests. I would say at that point, we didn't do a really good job of talking about those opportunities within the organization, right? And so they kind of had some of those conversations in the background and then came to me, right? I would say now what we try to do and what we try to coach all of our employees to do is one, obviously do what's asked of you and find opportunities for innovation. We try to chart out opportunities where they can try out some things, right? So they can understand what it is like to lead as well as to experiment in areas that are outside of their own purview. But then also talk about opportunities that we could tie them into within the organization as well as outside as we grow and develop. We're a strategic organization. And so our organizational chart isn't going to look like what it looks like today in 3 years. It's going to be different. I don't know exactly what it's going to be, but I'll have a sense of where we want to go from a strategic standpoint. And so we're actively having those conversations and want to know where people may want to go, right? That's critical.
I think it's really great that that's what you did, because I see this so often in companies where they have like the back office whispers, where whispering say that you might be tabbed to be the next leader without actually a conversation had between the individual and the company to see if that's something that they're even genuinely interested in. And so often you'll see someone who gets frustrated because they feel like they've been working their butt off for years, and then they're like, I don't get recognized here, and then they leave, and the company's like, oh no, we were just about to promote you, and it's like, oh no, you should have given me some form of indicator that this was going to happen. I'm now working at XYZ company.
Yeah. And I would add to that, Garrett. I mean, I think that's a really important point. And that as a leader, that may be the most frustrating thing. If I just hear out of the blue that someone just wants to leave because they feel like they didn't have opportunity. Now, we've done a lot of things to try to engage with people on their professional development and then also show a path with where we're going so that hopefully there's already a general understanding of that. But there's no harm. Like I have no problem with anybody coming to me, whether they're a direct report or not, and saying, hey, this is what I want to do. Because then that's in the back of my brain to say, okay, if we have an opportunity that is related, we can get you exposed to this. Like I said, we're part of a big network of people. If I can connect you with someone that has related experiences, that's fine. Because I want to serve you in your leadership development. Because I know if I'm investing in you, you're going to do a better job, right? And again, it's a lot about equity. And so I'm building up equity in that relationship that before you're thinking about something else that might be, maybe you get paid more money, right? Maybe it's another opportunity. If I have something that I can turn around and offer you instead, because I have a sense of where you want to go, then we're serving all needs. I'm serving you and helping you develop. If I can't do it, that's fine too. It's time for, it's okay for you to move on, but our reputation with you and the people that you talk about with will be strong because you'll feel served, right? So the takeaway there, right? Don't be bashful and don't be shy to talk about what you want to do from a career perspective. Not all organizations are going to take that maybe as strongly as we do in terms of trying to serve that person. But I don't think there's any downside in sharing that from a career perspective. You might have a different opinion, but
No,
me,
I agree.
I think that's important.
Yeah, no, I agree as well. I think it's very important. I think a lot of companies fear telling employees where their career path could go, because if the business economics don't work out that way, or if they are not performing as they thought they would perform, the opportunity doesn't present itself,
Right.
Then they feel like, oh my gosh, I kind of led you to believe this was the path, but this isn't actually the path. But at the same time, you still need to give them something. And this isn't always, but I sometimes hear this. You hear perhaps some older leaders that are like, oh, these Gen Zers or these millennials, they think they're in here on day one and can be the CEO by day two. And then you have other people where they're like, oh my gosh, I don't want to say anything about my career aspirations because I don't want them to think I'm too bold. I think more likely the best scenario is somewhere in the middle of being, hey, these are some of the goals that I would like to aspire to. I don't necessarily know if they're realistic, but I think being transparent and humble when communicating those goals and aspirations is probably the critical part of saying, like, adding in an element of like, I don't know if this is necessarily realistic, but here are the things that I would like to work towards in terms of my career path. The I don't know if this is realistic is a really critical element of that whole discussion, because if you come out saying, here's where I like to be, it could potentially be perceived as if you don't put me here, I'm walking. And that's not necessarily how you want to be perceived.
Yeah. And on the employer side, I know it's not necessarily our audience, but we're open-ended, right? So we hear that, right? And as long as you're doing your job optimally, you're contributing, as well as looking on taking on some additional responsibilities or trying to innovate within your role, then that is telling me that you not only can do your job effectively, you could potentially project onto doing another job effectively, right? And you're right, Garrett. It's tough to say, I absolutely have a job for you unless I do. But we can be open-ended. We can have conversations about where things might go. And that's where I said talking about where we're going strategically and such is important, because you have a better sense of that and you're not necessarily making commitments. But gosh, if what you want to aspire to do is part of where we want to go, that's beautiful, right? We get to provide that path to make that all happen. Everybody wins.
I love it. So two-part questions for the students. First part is, where do you see your career path projecting and developing over time? And then as a follow-on to that, how do you plan on going about communicating those goals and aspirations to your company's leadership? Post in the comment section. I'd love to learn about it. So, Sean, you work with a lot of students. What was the most creative way a student ever asked for your time to connect?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I would say overall, there's a couple creative ways. I mean, people need to do their research, right? And if there's a personal connection that can be had, and there's so much information that's out there, right? From a personal perspective in terms of where you're from, what you're interested in, and all those things. I would say it hasn't been super creative, but it's with connecting with me on some of those things, right? I'm from Philadelphia originally. I'm a big Sixers fan. I have Bengals season tickets living here in Cincinnati. So, I'm not a super complex person. You can ask me about those things and get me going pretty quickly. And then that can lead to something else. But that would be on, kind of the one-on-one interpersonal perspective. I would say, probably the way that it has been done most effectively has been to be empathetic, right? And so to understand that, I think you touched on this already, Garrett. Generally, people do want to help others from a networking and from an assistance standpoint. But it's understanding that I'm a busy guy, right? And sometimes I feel goofy saying that, but it's just a reality, right? And so have a lot of demands on my time, both professionally and personally, but I'm busy. And so being empathetic to that. And so if they're reaching out, not reaching out continuously all the time, demanding, right? But being thoughtful that way and respectful. And then eventually, I'll do my best to respond. So that's what I would say is, think about some personal connections that you might have that could be helpful from a connection standpoint. And then there's no harm in frequency. Just be thoughtful about the person's schedule and time when reaching out.
I love that. I think that's really good advice there, Sean. I think for a lot of students, it's finding that fine balance. I think there's a lot of students that have this fear of rejection, and they go through and they get in their mind and like, oh, should I send this connection request to this person? I don't know. They probably wouldn't even be happy to talk to me. I shouldn't even probably do it. And it's like after a half hour of going back and forth in your mind as to whether or not you should click connect a button on LinkedIn, you got to just send it and put it out there. Now, at the same time, if you are constantly messaging someone and they're not getting back to you, that's probably a bit much. And so where's that happy medium? Definitely, I think the first step is to take action, but the second step is to recognize a little bit of situational awareness, I guess I would call it, is to understand what is the situation this person might be facing. If you notice that there's a news thing that's going on that's impacting their company, maybe you could say, hey, I noticed that you're going through XYZ situation right now. It must be an interesting time period for you. I'd love to just learn your thoughts. But I guess, Sean, I'd love to ask, from a student's perspective who might fear rejection, why do professionals like helping students? What causes professionals to want to have an informational interview with a student?
Yeah. So again, I think as busy as we are and as focused on what we're doing today, um, we were at one point always in your shoes, right? Like in this short conversation, I've talked about a few different people, maybe not by name, but by occasion, that people lifted me up, right? And so there's always that. I'm in an industry where that's part of our mission, and so I might be a little bit more focused on it, candidly. But I would say inherently for the other CEOs that I work with and know, or members that I know that do different types of work, they want to be able to pay back, what was given to them by helping lift others into their network. So yeah, I would say that's I don't, this is kind of bold. I guess I would say anybody who would not respond in a way, in a positive way, eventually to help support you might be somebody you don't want to connect with anyways.
That's not a bold statement at all. I think you're absolutely right. If someone's so not in a position where they're willing to take the time to meet, if you end up getting them on your calendar, are they going to give you the kind of time or insight that you may want to hear? You hear there's always the old adage, you never meet your heroes, but in this scenario, it's like if you put someone up on this pedestal and they really object to meeting with you and you finally get in a meeting with them, it's like they may not live up to the hype that you've built up in your mind for them.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And in my world, as I mentioned, have great kitchen cabinet of CEOs that I work with outside of this industry to advise me, and then also that we just work with for other ventures. But part of my role is to connect with our members, to have them engage as volunteers or donors, right? And to that end, Garrett, when they respond, even if it's in a shortened fashion where they eventually do it, if they're not engaged, I know it's not gonna be worth my time, right? And so I need to write off that relationship pretty quickly.
What is your advice for students who fear rejection?
Again, I think it's understanding that we were all in those shoes at one point. And while I've asked students in this conversation already to be empathetic, I think the other way around, just know that leaders like myself will be empathetic to you, right? And understanding that as long as you're doing it in a respectful, thoughtful way, we're not going to push back in such a way that is going to have a negative repercussion to you, your personal reputation, or anything else.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point that you bring up. What do you have to lose? Reach out, see what happens. It's not like it's not like you reaching out to them is going to be the thing that says, from a CEO or a senior leader, or really for any professional that matters, that student reached out to me on LinkedIn and I really didn't want to meet with them. I'm going to black mark them on every hiring website I could possibly find to make sure they're never employed here or anywhere I touch ever again. That doesn't exist. That's not even how it works. And no one's going to ever do that.
Yeah. The other piece too is, and this is the beauty of LinkedIn, now you can see everybody's networks and who knows who, right? And so I think it's also, if you get a warm lead, depending on who the person is, of someone that's already familiar with them and can make that introduction to someone that you know a little bit better, again, through an existing organization or entity that you're involved with, that's always helpful as well, right? Not in the same frame in terms of why you should fear rejection, but why you could potentially lower the percentage that you might not be rejected, but not be responded to, right? I think that's the other thing, is warming that up a little bit.
I mean, shoot, even companies that want to intentionally blackmark a person aren't even the greatest at blackmarking that person to not hire them again. It makes me think of that The Office episode where Ryan, the temp, who ends up getting promoted, ends up losing the company hundreds of thousands of dollars, gets fired, and then through that temp agency comes back into Dunder Mifflin, is now the receptionist, and they're like, Dunder Mifflin, this is Ryan. They're like, Ryan the temp? You were fired. And then he's like having a conversation with Michael. It's a hilarious scene, but the point is that there was someone they were meant to not rehire ever under any circumstance, somehow got back into the organization. That's a real thing that happens in especially bigger companies. Because it's just so hard to manage. So the point is, don't fear reaching out. There's nothing to lose. Put yourself out there, see what happens. So, Sean, let's talk about your transition from you were doing outreach, you were doing essentially biz dev within the fraternity space. Eventually you worked up into the executive kind of suite within the organization. How did you go about getting into that transition? What was that like?
Yeah, well, first of all, I love the office example. My wife is actually from Scranton, Pennsylvania. So when I used to drive to see her, her family lived on the south side of Scranton. The sign that is in the opening sequence, they had to move off the Central Scranton Expressway into the mall because too many people were pulling over and taking pictures. So, anyways, love the office. Yeah, I mean, so I think at that point, like I said, some people had faith in me from a management perspective, to be able to jump into this role and lead my peers. And I had, in that nonprofit management degree, had done some things already that would apply management principles to the work I was doing. And so had to learn by doing a lot. So kind of two things happened to me on my path to an operations role to where I'm a CEO. So number one, our organization instituted a strategic plan, and we had never had one before. And so it was my opportunity to kind of sink my teeth into that, integrate that into everything we were doing. And that became kind of my hallmark. So that was really helpful, was number one. And then number two, as my predecessor was in the process of kind of charting out his retirement, got really thoughtful about my professional development. So, I was an internal guy, right? At that point, yeah, I'd been at Subaru was only for a year, but if I was going to be CEO, what kind of credentials was I going to have to be able to be impressive when we sent out the release that I was going to be the 5th executive vice president CEO in the history of Phi Delta Theta. So, did a lot of things from a leadership development perspective, both regionally. I got an executive business certificate at Notre Dame. Was really thoughtful about my network and other people that had done this kind of work for others, both internally and outside of the organization, and tried to learn from them. I mentioned the kitchen cabinet, trying to build that up in terms of people that had some of those experiences. So yeah, those were kind of the two big things.
That's cool. No, I like that. I like that it sounds like a very natural rise and throughout the ranks. What caused you to want to stay within the organization and not venture back out again?
Yeah, so I guess from an organizational perspective, I mentioned innovation being something that's a hallmark of what we do, and that has kind of carried with me in my role. I was always thoughtful, again, on that strategic plan of where we wanted to go, but also knowing that we didn't have it quite figured out. So there was, even in the nonprofit space, there is some R&D that's required, right, for us to try some different things. And so that was just the way we were doing things, and the latitude that I was given gave me a chance to kind of take on new challenges every day. And also, working with college students every day is a new adventure, right? They're always going to challenge you and kind of keep you young in your way of thinking. And so those two things are still true today, but kept me interested in the work in the organization, specifically for us. And that, coupled with everything else I just mentioned, kept my interest. And then I will say, and I think this goes back to what we said before, I had a sense of where I wanted to go, whether it be here or elsewhere at that point, right? I gained all these experiences where I was kind of lining myself up where I could lead an organization. And I had those conversations for us, it would have been with our board, right? And for other people, it'd be others. And they had a sense of that's where I wanted to go. So through that transparent discussion, they did enough for me on a personal level, and enough of a community kept me enough in the loop in terms of where the organization was going to go to make sure that I did leave, right? And so again, I think if you're transparent and having those discussions, that's a helpful exercise. Because I think that was very effective for me to be able to grow, develop, continue to take on responsibility, and also see that maybe there wasn't a super specific path yet, but there could be. And I need to have a little faith by working hard. That faith was going to be thanked for.
I love that. So I'd love to take a time to ask one more question to the students. Post in the comments section. Who are the types of leaders that you'd like to be connecting with? I'd love to learn. And by that, I just mean like what types of companies, what types of roles within those companies, technology leaders, operations leaders, sales leaders, finance leaders, HR leaders. Post in the comment section. Who are the types of leaders that you would like to be connecting with? Sean, this has been a really interesting and insightful conversation around how to get your foot in the door for professional opportunities. Are there any final tips or suggestions that you have for students as they enter their career path, as they work towards the professional outcomes that they're trying to achieve?
Yeah, so we talk about all the time in the work that we do. I believe in servant leadership, and obviously we're a nonprofit, and so from our perspective, that's part of our mission again. But what we try to do in every interaction is to not just do what we say we're going to do, but also exceed expectations. And in doing that, right, when we're serving a member or a parent or a university official, right, anybody else who we may interact with, if we are, in the example of an email, right, if we're responding to somebody's email and answering their question, that's great. Because obviously that is our obligation within that relationship. However, if we're thinking through what the follow-up question might be that person is going to ask based on their own personal perspective and their own worldview with their relationship with us, and we're answering that proactively, right, engaging them, we are exceeding expectations. And in turn, what that's doing, Garrett, is that's building a personal reputation about what a strong individual professional I am, right? And who knows who that parent, university official, or student is and what they're connected to, right? And all of a sudden, my brand and how I serve that person is going to be enhanced, and the organization that I work for, the way that they're perceived, their brand is going to be enhanced as well. And that does nothing but bode well for the future.
I love that. 2 core keys I'm pulling out: curiosity and an intentional focus on your brand, even when you think no one's watching. I really think that's really powerful, Sean. Well, thanks for being here, Sean. I really appreciate your insights. Students, thank you all for being here. Have a wonderful rest of your evening. See everybody.